Can you hear it? I can hear it. That clock is ticking away, going tick, 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 tick. And it's after 11 o'clock, and you know what that means. It means it's time for your favorite show and mine, Countdown to Armageddon. And this is your host, Publius, bringing you the latest and greatest in whatever I feel like. And today I want to talk to you about the subject of insurrection. This is a word being tossed around quite a lot recently, since January 6th, over the situation that developed in Washington, D.C. And I thought I would break this down to you and show you just what this means and what actually happened. Now, let's start with what actually happened. January 6th, the day the U.S. Congress was supposed to review the Electoral College votes and officially declare a president. During the time that they were counting these votes, a large protest gathered in Washington, D.C. at the request of the president. Now, thousands and thousands of people showed up to this protest. They were protesting to try to let Congress know they felt the election was stolen, that it was rigged, that the election was not valid. As the day went on, a group of these, of a couple hundred, maybe even 1,000, actually marched on over to the Capitol building. Now, so far, you have a peaceful march. Then, all of a sudden, a group out of this group started storming the Capitol building itself. They broke in. None of them were armed. None of them went out of their way to beat people up. There were injuries, and the only death that was recorded on the police side was a man who died of natural causes. Yes, the police officer, the Capitol Hill police officer that everybody wants to turn into a martyr because obviously these white supremacists killed him, died of natural causes. And the autopsy did not say it was brought about due to foul play or anything else. He died of natural causes. So we can basically conclude from this that he was not being assaulted, he was not beat up, nobody was shoving him around or anything like this, or this would have been included in the autopsy. Now, there was one death that was related to gun injuries, and that is a protester who was shot by a cop. Capitol Hill Police Department, one of the members, shot a woman who had broken into the Capitol building. Now, all the protesters did, and I'm not saying that they're innocent, please. What they did is they broke into the building. Many of them broke into offices, and in some examples I've heard they actually stole things. Nobody was assaulted. No members of Congress were assaulted. Now, what you have here, you have a protest that turned into a riot. This riot broke the law, and everybody that stormed that Capitol, that broke into the Capitol building, deserves to be arrested and charged with rioting. Now, those are the facts. Those have nothing to do with my opinion, your opinion, or anybody else's opinion. Those are simple, straightforward facts. Another straightforward fact is this is not the first example of a protest that turned violent. This is not the only example of a protest that became a riot. Even in D.C., but 6 months prior to this, there was a rally held at a federal building, outside of a federal building, and as people were leaving the rally, they were accosted and harassed, and in some cases shoved around by the protesters who were protesting against what the rally was in support of. Now again, nobody pulled a gun, nobody tried to take over the government, nobody went at the protest and tried to, kill a politician. They didn't try to assume power. Now, both of those rallies, both of those situations are similar to a number of rallies and protests that happened over the preceding year. where government buildings were stormed by the citizens. The difference is, in most of the other protests and rallies, many of the riots turned out throwing Molotov cocktails and carrying weapons. The situation at the Capitol building, no weapons. The only weapons involved anywhere were held by the police. Now, let's look at the charge of insurrection. Insurrection means to try to overthrow the government. Did these people try to overthrow the government? No. They were there to protest what they saw was their election being stolen. Now, whether you agree with them or not, they have every right to protest this. You think it's a lie? That's fine. They have a right to protest it. And I'll give you a tit-for-tat example. All these BLM and Antifa people that are out there protesting against situations where a lot of people felt the police officers were justified. So if you can protest that, then these people can protest based on their opinions and their feelings of things. It's only fair. That's the point of protest, to be able to vent your frustrations and tell your government what you think. Now, when the protest crosses that line, when they break into buildings, when they throw Molotov cocktails, when they try to set the buildings on fire, when they assault people, then you cease having a protest, you have a riot. Different subject. Rioters should be arrested, pure and simple. Now, does this mean that, like the situation on the 6th of January, that it's okay for the cop just to haul off and shoot someone? No. And that is exactly what happened there. Because this protester that was shot was not harming anybody, there was no one that was in imminent danger from her. There is no justification for having him shoot and kill a protester. And I'd like to raise you all a little thought equation. If at any of the other riots that happened throughout the country over the preceding 6 months to a year, if a police officer had pulled out a gun and shot one of the rioters, even if that rioter, unless that rioter was throwing a Molotov cocktail or actually threatening the life of someone, that cop would have been wrong too. Because there's no justification for the use of force. Not that degree of force. Deadly force should only be used when someone's life is threatened or people are in danger. If that Capitol Hill police officer who shot that protester was so worried about a protester who was nowhere near him, was not looking at him, then I'm honestly going to tell you the man deserves to lose his job. Should he go to jail? Maybe. I mean, what he did is wrong. But that's neither here nor there. Because we all know that if this had happened in another riot over the preceding 6 months, we would never hear the end of this. That officer would have been lynched by the media, and there would have been protests all over after that. And yes, those protests would lead to riots, and buildings would burn, and people would be assaulted, and the mainstream media would report this as, well, they were mostly peaceful. So, what you have here is a case of a protest that was mostly peaceful. Let's be honest. Hundreds of thousands of people showed up. Only a couple hundred broke into the Capitol building. And I'm just, going off of estimates that I've heard at different times. I don't know the exact numbers on any one of the things, but I do know there was a large body of people that broke into the Capitol. I do know that none of them were armed. I do know they did not go hunting down the halls to try to find members of Congress to beat the hell out of. They broke into offices, they did what they were going to do, they protested, they destroyed property, and yes, I do think each and every one of those protesters should be identified, arrested, and charged. They should have their day in court, at which point they should either pay their fine or go to jail for it, depending on what they did. Now, similar situations. The other situation in Washington, D.C., nothing was done to the protesters that were pushing and shoving even members of Congress around. That didn't matter. Look at the protests in Portland, Minneapolis, all throughout the country, where they stormed federal buildings, attacked City Hall, destroyed police departments. Were those people arrested? Some were, and they were immediately released. Or, if they were not released, because the federal government at that time arrested some people for federal laws, we have learned that since the new administration has come in office, those charges are slowly being dropped against all of them. Why? Because they were mostly peaceful protesters. So this brings us back to January 6th and the hoopla that is being raised over the situation. You have Democratic members of Congress who are actually trying to censure Republican members of Congress who want to point out the facts of the case. How dare you minimize the attempted insurrection? There was no attempted insurrection. The FBI has investigated, and you know what? They have found no evidence of any form of insurrection. Oops, kind of blows the narrative. But that doesn't stop our democratically ran House of Representatives, now does it? What they have decided is they are now going to have a bipartisan commission to investigate this. They're going to get to the facts. They're going to have subpoena power. They're going to prove this was an insurrection regardless of the facts. Bipartisan. How have they chosen their bipartisanship? By using the 10 Republicans that voted to impeach President Trump. Now, these 10 people have received censure, condemnation, and they're no longer representative of their party. But you're going to count that as bipartisan? That's a little fishy. And a lot of people are looking at this new bipartisan commission and going, this is just going to be a witch hunt. Furthermore, it's not going to investigate insurrection, because there was none. It's going to make up an insurrection. It's going to change the meaning of insurrection, like we heard our Attorney General say, but as long as, it's not an insurrection if people weren't in office. It's only insurrection if people are in there. So attacking a federal building no longer becomes a crime if nobody's there. It's not an attack on the government if regular businesses are being held. Kind of interesting. But this bipartisan commission is going to get to the facts. But are they really after the facts? Now, Publius will tell you right now, they don't give a shit about the facts. These are the same people that voted to impeach the president for inciting insurrection, for telling people to come out and protest. Now, if that is a crime, then why is Maxine Waters walking the streets? Why is Vice President Kamala allowed to be vice president? Why is any number of Democratic members of the House and the Senate still walking around? They should be arrested. They've called for more and more protests. Their idea is that, well, I'm surprised there's not more protests every day. They should be out in the streets every day. If that is inciting insurrection, because all the president did is said, come let the House and the Senate know. Voice your opinion. And he actually specifically said to do it peacefully. Now, if you can impeach him for inciting a riot, inciting insurrection for that, then how can, your idea of what is fair is gone. You had already decided, and every member of the House that voted for impeachment, guess what? Their minds were made up before the case was even brought. There was no evidence presented, there was no hearings in the matter, and it went straight to a vote. So based off of what they read in the media, or what they heard, secondhand hearsay evidence, they decided the president was guilty. because Orange Man bad. Now, and only this situation is to be considered insurrection. All the other protests, all the other things that happen where people intentionally go out to hurt others and destroy buildings, those are okay. That's not insurrection. That's just a peaceful protest. Now, there has been a move by the Republicans to make this bipartisan commission actually look at all the protests where violence took place. But no, they don't want. The Democrats are opposed to that because there's a protest. This is an insurrection. Why is it an insurrection? Because it came after them. It let them know somebody thought their ideas were bullshit. It challenged them. Now, none of the other protests were challenges against Democrat views. So apparently, when you decide to protest, as long as you're protesting and doing things the Democrats support, then it's legal. If you protest against something that they don't like, well, that's illegal and you need to be shut down. This, of course, is par for the course for the Democratic Party and our members of Congress. Why? Because they're the biggest bunch of hypocrites I've ever seen. Everything is okay when they do it, but nothing is right when somebody else does it. This is the same party, mind you, that tried to impeach President Trump the first time for a quid pro quo situation with the Ukraine. They elected and put in Joe Biden, who actually admitted on camera he did this. Do you see the glitch? Some people are sitting there going, well, Trump was withholding funding if they didn't find him the evidence. Well, Biden flat out withheld the money. Told him, I ain't giving you no money unless you do what I want. Fire that prosecutor. And as he said, some bitch, they fired her. So, you have one where it's blatantly done, and another where, depending on how you look at it, it might have been done. Might have. The sad part is the Ukrainians did not know anything about this quid pro quo situation. So I guess it didn't really happen the way people want to twist it to mean. But Biden's can't be seen any other way. Now they're going to tell you, well, he had nothing to benefit from having that prosecutor removed. And that, folks, is a lie. Biden's son was being investigated. The company he worked for, which he got the job of at purely because he was the vice president's son, was being investigated for criminal activities by this prosecutor. The prosecutor, mind you, that Biden got fired. So tell me there wasn't a blatant quid pro quo. It's hard to believe that those two situations, which are so clear, get two different views. Biden's was okay, Trump's was not. The different protests and riots throughout the whole year, those were okay, but January 6th was not. And it all comes down to everything's okay if a Democrat does it or if it supports the Democrats' views. If it's not, it's obviously an insurrection. And now there's something telling in that. Keep in mind, all these were people who believed, based on what they had heard and read and seen, that something was very fishy with the 2020 election. Now, they are being considered white supremacists, they are being considered domestic terrorists, and they are being charged and looked at as possibly attempting to overthrow the government. Now, mind you, you can go to a BLM party, a BLM protest, and they flat out say they're going to burn the system down, tear it down. Well, no justice as long as this is around. System must go. The protesters in D.C. weren't saying that. Now, the protesters, when Trump had a rally And many members of Congress and senators that were Republicans went to that rally, and on their way out, they were harassed, shoved around, and in some cases, in most cases, were verbally abused by the population. And as I said, some of them were actually physically shoved. That's okay. Now, I wonder how okay that would have been if we had reversed the parties. If the protesters on January 6th had been Democrats, would that have been insurrection? Or would that have been a case of, well, these people were just trying to get their message across? Insurrection has to work both ways. Protests have to work both ways. You can't have it legal for one group and wrong for another. You can't call one thing mostly peaceful and deny any aspect of a riot to it, and the other one in a case of insurrection. Not even just calling it a riot. You can't have it both ways. President Biden says there's no such thing as Antifa. It's just an idea. But yet we've seen Antifa beat people up. So this idea, which openly endorses the overthrow of the United States of America, along with BLM, those are okay. The fictional white supremacists that are out in all these large rallies, those are wrong. Now I'm going to tell you, do I think there are white supremacists out there? Oh, that's a given. Just as I think there are black supremacists out there. Do I think the white supremacists are a large percentage of the population? Not by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think you're going to even get 20% of the white population into a white supremacist group. Now, Publius is safe. I'd never be allowed in. Why? Because I'm not 100% white. I'm ethnic. I'm a minority. And I happen to know that groups like the KKK and the neo-Nazis would not allow me in. And that's okay. I wouldn't be a member of their organizations. Because contrary to what you're being told today, I believe firmly that no one race is superior to another, and no race is below another. You can't judge a person's competence and ability based on their skin color. You can't. To say anything other than that is racist. And that goes the other way too. If you think you have the right to judge a person because they are white, then you're a racist. If you think it's okay for BLM and Antifa to go out and try to burn down buildings and kill people, which they did do, remember, I believe the death toll from all the riots is up to 36, not counting the January 6th riot. Interesting. And please also keep in mind, the only person who was killed in the January 6th riot was a protester. Yes, there was another death, but they were not killed. It's not to be blamed on the riot. Now, for all of you out there that want to say, but it contributed to blah, 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 then are you also prepared to charge that every member of the BLM and Antifa groups that attempted to blind or maim police officers? Yes, they were doing this. They shot skyrockets at these people. They tried to blind them with lasers. Hell, they tried to burn them down with Molotov cocktails. Those are attempted murder. Were police officers killed? Yes. Were police officers injured? Oh, yes. So are you going to charge them too? But they were protesting something that was right. No, actually, most of them weren't. Yes, George Floyd, exception. several of the other cases that prompted all the riots? No. You got a knife, you're swinging it at someone, bang, bang, you're dead. You come charging out of a house with a knife, and the cops tell you multiple times to drop the weapon. You refuse to drop it, and you're still charging at them? Shoot them. I would. If you were charging at me with a knife as a citizen, just a normal, everyday citizen, you're charging me with a knife and I got a gun, I'm going to draw that gun. I'm going to tell you, drop it immediately. Drop the knife. If you don't, double tap. Why? Because you are an idiot, and I'm not going to let no idiot take my life if I can help it. We have a fundamental right to self-defense. Those police officers still have that right to defend themselves. When the girl, the latest, Michaela, who was trying to stab another girl, you're going to make her a hero? And you're going to villainize the police officer that shot her as she was swinging to stab someone? Wrong. I mean, I've told you all many times, pick your heroes better. Pick people like George Floyd. George Floyd, okay, he was high. He's on drugs. I understand he was passing counterfeit money. None of which mean he should have died. No, the police coroner did not find that he was asphyxiated. No, but he sure the heck wasn't helped by having a cop put his knee on his throat. That's just wrong. George Floyd, definitely a case of police brutality. Definitely a case of where the cops needed to get yanked up. And not just the Chauvelin or whatever his name is. Every one of those cops that were standing around doing nothing as he was doing this needs to be charged. A lot of the other cases that have come out over the last year, no. You're trying to kidnap kids? No. You have a weapon? No. You're going to sit there and try to tell me, well, cops kill blacks on purpose. No. More black people die at the hands of cops than any other race. Wrong. They have a larger percentage of encounters with the cops. Yes, actually they do. But why is that? Could it be because most blacks live in certain communities and those communities have a higher crime rate? I know that whenever we look in the city that I live in, cops tend to go out in certain districts, and it makes no difference what the ethnicity of that district is. Those are where most of the crimes are. And yes, that means you're going to encounter the police more often. And if you refuse and you act like an idiot, you're liable to get hurt. Part of it, sadly, because all too often nowadays, even if you just don't agree with the cop and don't bow down and kiss his backside, you might get hurt. Does this have anything to do with your race? Nope. Does this have everything to do with the thin blue line? You better believe it. Are you correct in protesting every example of police brutality? Hell yeah. Are you correct in protesting when the cop defends somebody's life? Wrong. Nope, sorry, you're not right. And when you protest, the minute you start throwing Molotov cocktails, hitting people, breaking windows, causing damage, destroying cars, burning whatever, you're no longer a protester. You're a rioter, and you should be charged. But you should not be charged with insurrection, because you're not trying to overthrow the government. And that's the key. You are a rioter, yes. You're a protester that went too far. I agree. You should be charged as such. You cannot charge based on the color of the skin. You cannot charge someone based on their political ideology. To do so undermines and defeats the entire concept of justice. And that's exactly what, apparently, our Democratic congresspeople want. Because they got scared. Now, there's an old meme. Socialism. Ideas so great they have to be shoved down your throat with a gun. And it's a paraphrase. I know there's different versions of it, but that's the reality. A socialist has no power other than the gun. A capitalist, on the other hand, a true capitalist, and maybe I'll do an episode later on about what is the difference between a socialist, a capitalist, and so on. They don't have the power of the gun. So you might want to think that over. So, bottom line, folks, no insurrection. And this committee is a joke, and it's becoming a farce, and it's just going to be a witch hunt. McCarthyism is back. Welcome to America. This has been Publius on your favorite show, Countdown to Armageddon. Hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. If you'd like to support this channel, please do so. You can do so through this platform or through any of the other information provided to you in this episode's description. Last but definitely not least, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this with your friends, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you can be notified every time we post a new episode. Thank you. Bye.